The deafening crack of a gunshot echoed through the canyon as Zadie Turner clutched her worn leather satchel, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her father's final warning rang in her ears. Cross our threshold again, and you'll meet the same fate as that coyote. 19 years as the daughter of the wealthiest rancher in Copper Ridge had ended with a single bullet fired at her feet and the weight of her family name stripped away forever. Colorado Territory, 1875. The rugged landscape of the West was unforgiving to most, but especially to a woman alone. Zadie had been traveling for 3 days now, her once fine boots cracked and blistered, her blue calico dress stained with dust and sweat. The accusations that had led to her banishment burned in her mind, falsehoods woven by her stepmother and eagerly believed by a father too blinded by his new wife to see the truth. The summer sun beat down mercilessly as Zadie trudged along the barely visible trail. Her water canteen had run dry hours ago, and the distant shimmer of what she hoped was a creek kept her moving forward. She hadn't expected exile to feel this way, like every step was both a severance and a liberation. The Turner name had been both shield and prison, and now she was neither protected nor confined by it. When she finally reached the creek, Zadie fell to her knees at its edge, plunging her hands into the cool water and bringing them to her cracked lips. The reflection that stared back at her seemed like a stranger, hazel eyes rimmed with exhaustion, auburn hair falling loose from pins that had once been arranged with care. "You look like you could use more than just water, miss." The voice startled her so badly she nearly toppled forward into the creek. Scrambling backward, Zadie reached for the small knife concealed in her boot, the only protection she'd managed to grab before being forced out. A man sat atop a dappled gray horse just 20 feet away. His broad shoulders were silhouetted against the setting sun, face partially hidden beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson. Something about the casual way he held himself in the saddle spoke of a lifetime spent on horseback. "Stay back," Zadie warned, her voice hoarse from disuse and thirst. The man raised his hands slowly. "No harm intended, just passing through and spotted you, not many folks out this way alone." He swung down from his saddle with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent more time on horseback than on foot. "Name's Tucker Xavier, most folks call me Tuck." He kept a respectful distance, but Zadie didn't lower her knife. Men who found women alone rarely had honorable intentions, that much she knew from the stories that traveled through town. "I don't need help," she lied, even as her empty stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. Tucker Xavier's mouth twitched with what might have been amusement, but his eyes remained kind. "My camp's just over that ridge, got coffee brewing and rabbit stew that'll be ready shortly. You're welcome to join, no strings attached," he gestured toward the west. "Or you can keep to yourself. Either way, might want to refill that canteen proper. Creek runs clearer upstream about 50 yards. Zadie studied him carefully. He wasn't dressed like the outlaws who occasionally passed through Copper Ridge, no flashy vest or excessive weaponry. Just practical trail clothes, worn boots, and a single revolver holstered at his side. His face was weathered by sun and wind, putting him somewhere in his late 20s, with eyes the color of the sky just before dusk. "Why would you help a stranger?" she asked, suspicion heavy in her voice. Tucker shrugged, a simple gesture that somehow conveyed more honesty than words. "Been on my own out here long enough to know sometimes folks need a hand." He turned back toward his horse. "Offer stands. I'll be heading back to camp now." Zadie watched as he mounted with practiced ease and guided his horse up the slight incline. Common sense told her to move in the opposite direction to find shelter elsewhere and avoid trusting a man she'd just met. But the gnawing hunger and bone-deep exhaustion made the decision for her. "Wait," she called, gathering her satchel. "I could use a meal." Tucker nodded without surprise, as though he'd expected her decision all along. "Can you ride? Silver here can carry us both to camp." Zadie hesitated only briefly before approaching. "I've been riding since before I could walk." With a slight nod, Tucker extended his hand and pulled her up behind him. The horse shifted beneath the added weight but remained steady. "Hold on," he advised, Zadie placed her hands lightly on his sides, careful to maintain what little propriety remained possible in such a situation. As they rode, she caught the scent of leather, wood smoke, and something distinctly masculine that belonged to the cowboy himself. The camp was simple but well organized, a small fire ring with flames already licking at a suspended pot, bedroll laid out beneath a lean-to shelter, and supplies neatly arranged. Tucker's horse, Silver, snorted contentedly when they arrived, clearly recognizing home for the night. Once dismounted, Tucker moved with the efficiency of routine, removing Silver's saddle and brushing him down before seeing to anything else. Zadie stood awkwardly at the edge of the camp, unsure of her place in this stranger's domain. "Make yourself comfortable," Tucker said, gesturing toward a fallen log positioned near the fire. "Stew's just about ready." As Zadie settled on the log, she felt the weight of the past 3 days crash over her. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked stray hairs behind her ear, a gesture of attempted composure that felt absurdly inadequate. Tucker pretended not to notice, busying himself with checking the stew and pouring coffee into a tin cup. When he handed her the steaming liquid, their fingers brushed briefly, and Zadie was surprised by the unexpected gentleness in his calloused hands. "Thank you," she murmured, wrapping her fingers around the warm metal. "You got a name?" Tucker asked, stirring the stew one final time. Zadie hesitated. The Turner name had opened doors throughout Colorado territory, but now it marked her as the daughter who had shamed her family, or so the rumors would soon say. "Zadie," she finally offered, omitting her surname. "Just Zadie?" Tucker asked with a raised eyebrow. "Just Zadie," she confirmed, lifting her chin slightly. Tucker nodded, accepting the boundary without question. "Well, just Zadie, hope you like rabbit stew. It's about all I can manage that's edible." The stew was simple but flavorful, filled with wild onions and herbs Tucker had gathered along the trail. Zadie ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger as her body demanded nourishment. Tucker refilled her bowl without comment, his eyes occasionally studying her with quiet assessment. When she'd finally had enough, Zadie set her bowl aside and found the courage to speak. "I should tell you that I can't pay you for this kindness." Tucker looked genuinely surprised, "Never asked for payment. Still, I should be honest, I have almost nothing." "Most folks out here are running to something or from something," Tucker observed, sipping his coffee. "Don't much matter to me which one you're doing." The straightforward acceptance in his words loosened something tight in Zadie's chest. "My family, they don't want me anymore." The admission burned her throat worse than the hot coffee. Tucker's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. "Their loss," he said simply. They sat in silence as the fire crackled between them, stars emerging in the vast canvas of the darkening sky. Zadie couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this peculiar mixture of utter desolation and unexpected comfort. "Where you headed?" Tucker eventually asked. Zadie stared into the flames. "I don't know," she admitted. "Somewhere I can start over, I suppose." Tucker nodded as if this were a perfectly reasonable plan. "I'm headed to Silverton. Got work waiting at the Double Creek Ranch. You're welcome to ride along if you'd like. Town's big enough you could find work there." Suspicion flared again in Zadie's mind. "Why would you offer that to someone you don't know? Trail's dangerous for anyone traveling alone," he said matter-of-factly. "More so for a woman. I'm going that way regardless." He tossed the dregs of his coffee into the fire, where it hissed against the hot stones. "Besides, you remind me of someone I knew once." There was a story there, Zadie sensed, but Tucker's expression had closed off, making it clear the topic wasn't open for discussion. "I'll think about it," Zadie said, though in truth she had few alternatives. Tucker nodded again and rose to his feet. "Take my bedroll for tonight, I'll keep watch first." Zadie shook her head firmly. "I can't take your bed. Been sleeping on the ground longer than you've been alive, I expect," Tucker said with the hint of a smile. "One more night won't kill me." Zadie wanted to argue, but exhaustion was tugging insistently at her consciousness. "Wake me for second watch then," she compromised. "I can take my turn." Tucker's expression suggested he had no intention of waking her, but he nodded all the same. As Zadie settled into his bedroll, the scent of pine and leather enveloping her, She couldn't help wondering what twist of fate had placed Tucker Xavier in her path exactly when she needed him most. Sleep claimed her quickly, deeper and more peaceful than she'd expected. When she woke, dawn was already breaking across the eastern sky, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. Tucker was crouched by a freshly built fire, coffee already brewing. "You didn't wake me," Zadie accused softly, sitting up. Tucker shrugged. "Figured you needed the rest more than I needed the sleep." He handed her a cup of coffee. "Made your decision yet?" Zadie wrapped her fingers around the warm cup. "I'll ride with you to Silverton," she said, making the only choice that seemed reasonable, "but I'll find my own way once we get there." Tucker nodded, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Fair enough. We should reach town in about 5 days if the weather holds." As they packed up camp, Zadie felt the weight of her new reality settling around her shoulders. 5 days ago, she had been Zadie Turner, daughter of the most prominent rancher in Copper Ridge. Now she was just Zadie, riding with a stranger toward an uncertain future. Tucker worked methodically, his movements efficient and practiced. When he noticed her watching, he offered a small, reassuring smile. "You ready?" Zadie took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready as I'll ever be." For the first time since her father had driven her from the only home she'd ever known, Zadie felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers she could barely imagine, but at least for the next 5 days she wouldn't face them alone. The morning light caught in Tucker's hair as he mounted Silver, revealing strands of copper among the brown. He extended his hand to help her up, and this time Zadie took it without hesitation. "Thank you," she said, meaning more than just the assistance. Tucker's eyes met hers briefly. "Everyone deserves a second chance," he said, his voice carrying a weight that suggested he knew this truth intimately. "Even when their own kin can't see it." With those words, they set off toward Silverton, two strangers bound together by circumstance and the vast, unforgiving beauty of the Colorado wilderness. The first day of travel passed in relative silence. Zadie found herself settling into the rhythm of the journey, the steady gait of Silver beneath them. The changing landscape, as they moved through aspen groves and pine forests, crossing small streams and navigating rocky terrain. Tucker seemed content with quiet, speaking only when necessary to point out landmarks or suggest rest stops. By mid-afternoon, Zadie's body ached from sharing the saddle, but she refused to complain. Her pride, the one thing her family hadn't been able to take from her, wouldn't allow it. When Tucker finally called a halt near a small spring, she dismounted carefully, hiding a wince as her stiffened muscles protested. "Not used to riding double," Tucker observed, watching her with those perceptive blue eyes. "I'll manage," Zadie replied, straightening her spine. Tucker nodded, a hint of approval in his expression. "We'll make better time tomorrow. There's a trading post about a day's ride from here. Might be able to find you a mount of your own." Zadie's heart sank. "I told you I have no money." "Never said you needed any," Tucker replied, already busy unsaddling Silver. "Man who runs the post owes me a favor," Zadie frowned. "I don't accept charity." Tucker paused, turning to look at her directly. "It's not charity to help someone who's down on their luck, it's just being human." Something in his straightforward declaration disarmed her protest before it fully formed. Instead, Zadie found herself nodding. "Thank you, then." That evening, as they made camp, Zadie insisted on contributing. She gathered firewood while Tucker hunted, and when he returned with 2 prairie hens, she cleaned and prepared them with practiced skill. "You've done that before," Tucker commented, watching her efficient movements. "My mother taught me," Zadie said, the memory bringing both warmth and pain. She believed every woman should know how to provide for herself regardless of station. She paused, hands stilling briefly. "She died when I was 12. Things changed after that." Tucker was quiet for a moment. "My ma died when I was young too, 9 years old. Never gets easier, does it?" The simple understanding in his voice touched something deep within Zadie. "No," she agreed softly. "It doesn't." As night fell, they shared the roasted birds and more of Tucker's coffee. This time, the silence between them felt more companionable than awkward. "My stepmother is why I had to leave." Zadie said suddenly, surprising herself with the admission. She married my father 3 years ago, convinced him I was improper with her brother when he visited. Her voice hardened. It wasn't true. But she wanted me gone, and my father chose to believe her. Tucker's expression darkened. Some men can't see what's right in front of them when a pretty face clouds their vision. He gave me an hour to pack my things. Said if I tried to stay in town, he'd ruin any chance I had of employment. Zadie's laugh held no humor. The great Emmett Turner protecting his family name by casting out his own daughter. Tucker studied her across the fire. Turner of the Triple T Ranch, Zadie tensed, instantly regretting her candor. You've heard of it. Hard not to in these parts, Tucker said carefully. Your father's reputation reaches far. Then you understand why I didn't share my full name, Zadie said, watching him warily. Tucker nodded slowly. Names carry weight out here, some good, some bad. He poked at the fire with a stick. But a person shouldn't be judged solely by the name they carry. And what about you? Zadie asked, deflecting attention from herself. The name Xavier doesn't tell me much. A small smile crossed Tucker's face. Not much to tell. My pa was a wanderer. Taught me to work cattle before he got himself killed in a saloon fight when I was 16. Been drifting since, working ranches where they'll have me. He shrugged. Simple story. But Zadie sensed there was more something in the careful way he constructed his narrative suggested omissions rather than lies. Still, she respected his right to privacy. After all, she had her own secrets. We should get some rest, Tucker said, rising to his feet. Long ride tomorrow. This time when he offered her his bedroll, Zadie didn't protest. The day's journey had depleted her limited reserves, and tomorrow promised more of the same. As she drifted toward sleep, Zadie found herself wondering about the man who slept several feet away, his back against a tree trunk and hat pulled low over his eyes. Tucker Xavier was unlike any man she'd encountered in Copper Ridge, direct yet gentle, capable yet unassuming. In the span of a day, he'd become her unlikely protector, asking nothing in return. It was a debt she had no idea how to repay. Morning came with a light drizzle that soon turned to steady rain. They traveled with Tucker's slicker spread across their shoulders, offering minimal protection against the persistent downpour. By noon, both were soaked through, and Silver trudged through increasingly muddy terrain with visible reluctance. We need shelter, Tucker shouted over a sudden crack of thunder. Storm's getting worse. Zadie nodded, water streaming down her face despite the hat Tucker had insisted she wear. Her dress clung to her uncomfortably, and she couldn't remember ever feeling so thoroughly chilled. Tucker guided Silver off the main trail, following what appeared to be a game path through dense underbrush. After nearly a mile of slow progress, a small cabin appeared through the curtain of rain, abandoned by the look of it, with a sagging roof and shuttered windows. Trapper's cabin, Tucker explained as they approached. Used during winter months, should be empty this time of year. The cabin was indeed uninhabited, though signs of recent use were evident in the stacked firewood and hanging dried herbs. Tucker quickly assessed the single-room structure, testing the roof for leaks and checking the small stone fireplace for blockages. Seems sound enough, he declared, beginning to build a fire while Zadie stood dripping on the dirt floor. You need to get out of those wet clothes. Zadie wrapped her arms around herself defensively. I have nothing else to wear. Tucker rummaged through his saddlebags, pulling out a worn flannel shirt and a pair of trousers. These'll be too big, but they're dry. He hung them on a nail near the growing fire. I'll wait outside while you change. You're soaked too, Zadie protested. I'll manage, Tucker said, already moving toward the door. Don't be ridiculous, Zadie said, practicality overcoming propriety. Turn your back, I'll do the same when it's your turn. Tucker hesitated, then nodded. He faced the door while Zadie hurriedly stripped off her sodden dress and underclothes, quickly pulling on his offered clothing. The shirt hung nearly to her knees, and she had to roll the trousers several times at the waist and ankles. Your turn, she said, facing the rough-hewn wall. She heard the rustle of clothing as Tucker changed, followed by the sound of wet garments being hung near the fire. Only when he cleared his throat did she turn back around. Tucker stood in dry trousers and a faded red union suit top, his hair damp and tousled. Something about seeing him this way, less the capable cowboy and more simply a man, made Zadie's cheeks warm despite the cabin's chill. "Fire should warm the place up soon," Tucker said, either not noticing or politely ignoring her flush. "Storm might keep us here through tomorrow." Zadie nodded, suddenly aware of the intimacy of their situation alone in a remote cabin, far from civilization. Yet strangely, she felt no fear. In the short time she'd known him, Tucker had proven himself honorable in ways many so-called gentlemen of her acquaintance never had. They spent the afternoon drying their possessions and making the cabin more habitable. Tucker repaired a loose shutter while Zadie swept the floor with a crude broom she found in a corner. By evening, the single room felt almost cozy, with the fire casting warm light across the wooden walls. Tucker produced jerky and hardtack from his supplies, apologizing for the meager offerings. "Wasn't planning on waiting out a storm." "It's more than enough," Zadie assured him, accepting her portion gratefully. "I've been wondering something. Why Silverton?" "You said there's work waiting, but there must be ranches closer to Copper Ridge." Tucker chewed thoughtfully before answering. "Double Creek's foreman is an old friend, says they're expanding, need experienced hands." He paused. "And sometimes it's good to put distance between yourself and certain memories." "You're running from something too," Zadie observed quietly. Tucker's expression remained neutral. "Not running, just moving forward." They fell silent, the rain drumming steadily on the cabin roof. Zadie found herself studying Tucker's profile in the firelight, the straight line of his nose, the slight cleft in his chin, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck when damp. "Tell me about Silverton," she requested, pulling her gaze away before he could catch her staring. "What kind of place is it?" Tucker seemed relieved by the change of subject. "Mining town originally, but it's grown, got proper businesses now, even a hotel with real glass windows. The hills around it are good grazing land, so ranches have sprung up. Different from Copper Ridge, newer, less established families." "Somewhere I could start over," Zadie mused. "If that's what you're looking for," Tucker agreed. He hesitated, then added, "You have skills that would be valuable there." "Skills?" Zadie asked, surprised. "You handle yourself well." "Cook better than most trail hands I've known, and you've got education, it shows in how you speak." Tucker shrugged. "The school teacher in Silverton left last winter. Town's been looking for a replacement." Zadie considered this unexpected possibility. She'd always enjoyed learning, had even helped tutor the ranch hand's children when her father allowed it. "Do you really think they'd consider someone like me, a woman with no references, no history they can verify?" "Folks out here judge you more on what you can do than where you came from," Tucker said. "Besides, children need teaching, regardless of who's doing it." The idea took root in Zadie's mind, a way to support herself that didn't involve domestic service or marriage, the two options most readily available to women of her situation. For the first time since leaving Copper Ridge, she felt a glimmer of genuine hope. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me at that creek." Tucker's eyes met hers across the fire, intense in a way that made her breath catch. "You'd have managed," he said with quiet conviction. "You're stronger than you know, Zadie Turner." The sound of her full name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver through her. In that moment, the small cabin felt even smaller, the space between them charged with something Zadie couldn't quite name. Tucker broke the connection first, rising to check on their drying clothes. "Should get some sleep," he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "Rain's letting up. We'll likely be able to move on tomorrow." Zadie nodded, suddenly aware of the single bedroll they'd managed to keep relatively dry. Tucker solved the dilemma by insisting she take it while he made do with his saddle for a pillow and his duster as a blanket. As Zadie settled into the bedroll, she watched Tucker arrange himself as comfortably as possible on the hard, packed earth floor. "Tucker," she said impulsively, "thank you for saying I'm strong. No one's ever told me that before." In the dim firelight, she could just make out his smile. "Just telling the truth as I see it," he replied. Zadie closed her eyes, letting the steady sound of rain and Tucker's deep, even breathing lull her toward sleep. For the first time in days, her dreams weren't haunted by her father's angry face or her stepmother's triumphant smile. Instead, she dreamed of mountains and open meadows, and a pair of steady blue eyes that looked at her as though she mattered. The trading post materialized like a mirage after a long day's ride through mud-slicked trails and swollen creeks. The storm had passed, but its effects lingered in the landscape. Tucker had remained largely silent throughout the day, responding to Zadie's questions but offering little conversation of his own. She sensed he was maintaining a deliberate distance after the unexpected intimacy of their sheltered night. The trading post was little more than a sturdy log structure with an attached corral and stable. A weathered sign declared it Holloway's in faded paint. As they approached, an older man with a silver-streaked beard emerged from the doorway, squinting against the late afternoon sun. "Well, if it ain't Tucker Xavier," the man called, a grin splitting his weathered face. "Thought you might have been caught in that deluge yesterday." "Found shelter just in time, Ellis," Tucker replied, dismounting and extending a hand to help Zadie down. "This is Zadie. She's traveling to Silverton with me." Ellis Holloway's bushy eyebrows rose slightly as he took in Zadie's appearance, her crumpled dress, now mostly dry but hopelessly stained, and her hair falling loose around her shoulders. To his credit, he made no comment beyond a respectful nod. "Madam, welcome to my humble establishment." Inside, the trading post was surprisingly well stocked, with shelves of canned goods, bags of flour and sugar, tools, ammunition, and various sundries needed for frontier living. A pot-bellied stove in the corner gave off welcome heat, and the scent of coffee filled the air. "Help yourself," Ellis said, gesturing toward the coffee pot. "Fresh, made an hour ago." While Zadie gratefully accepted a cup, Tucker drew Ellis aside, their conversation too quiet for her to hear. She pretended interest in a shelf of fabric bolts, but couldn't help noticing the occasional glance Ellis cast in her direction. Eventually, Tucker approached her. "Ellis has a spare room in the back where you can rest. His wife left some clothes behind when she moved to Denver last year." "Says you're welcome to whatever fits," Zadie frowned. "I can't just take already settled," Tucker interrupted gently. "Consider it an advance on future earnings in Silverton." Before she could protest further, Ellis's gruff voice joined in. "I'd consider it a favor, miss. Mary's things are just gathering dust, and she'd be pleased knowing they're being put to good use." Outnumbered, Zadie reluctantly agreed. The prospect of clean clothes was too tempting to refuse on principle alone. The back room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and small chest of drawers. Ellis brought in a basin of warm water and a bar of yellow soap that smelled faintly of lavender. "Take your time," he said kindly. "Supper won't be ready for an hour yet." Left alone, Zadie sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by the simple luxury of privacy and the promise of cleanliness. She washed thoroughly, grateful to remove the grime of travel from her skin and hair. The chest yielded several serviceable dresses, and she selected a blue-sprigged cotton that required only minor adjustments to fit her slimmer frame. When she emerged, hair neatly braided and wearing the clean dress, she found Tucker and Ellis seated at a rough-hewn table, deep in conversation that halted abruptly at her appearance. Tucker stared for a moment longer than was proper, something in his expression making Zadie's cheeks warm. "You look," he began, then cleared his throat, "better rested." Ellis gave a soft snort that might have been amusement. "Supper's nearly ready. Hope you don't mind venison stew." The meal was the most satisfying Zadie had eaten since leaving home. Afterward, Ellis produced a bottle of whiskey, pouring small measures for himself and Tucker. "None for the lady?" Tucker asked, noticing Zadie's empty cup. Ellis looked scandalized. "Wouldn't presume to offer," Zadie smiled. "I wouldn't refuse a small glass, Mr. Holloway. My father believed ladies should know how spirits taste, so they wouldn't be taken advantage of at social gatherings." Ellis's eyebrows shot up, but he poured her a modest serving without comment. The whiskey burned pleasantly down Zadie's throat, warming her from the inside out. "Tucker tells me you're looking for work in Silverton," Ellis said, his tone carefully neutral. Zadie nodded. I understand they might need a teacher. That they do, Ellis confirmed. Last one couldn't handle the winters, left Christmas Day. He studied her thoughtfully. Teaching's hard work out here. Children come when they can, often miles apart in age and education, pays little. I'm not afraid of hard work, Zadie replied, and I need very little. Ellis nodded, seeming satisfied. Tucker mentioned you need a mount. I can't accept, Zadie began, but Ellis waved away her protest. Got a mare out back. Good temperament, not too old. Previous owner couldn't pay his tab, left her as partial settlement. Ellis sipped his whiskey. She's been eating my grain for 2 months with no purpose. You'd be doing me a favor taking her off my hands. Zadie glanced at Tucker, who maintained a carefully neutral expression. She suspected this arrangement had been part of their private conversation earlier, but couldn't prove it. That's very generous, Mr. Holloway, she said finally. I'll repay you once I'm established. Ellis nodded, apparently satisfied with the compromise. You two can have the back rooms tonight. I sleep up in the loft. After Ellis retired, Zadie and Tucker sat in companionable silence. The whiskey had loosened something in Zadie's chest, making her feel both lighter and more grounded than she had in days. Ellis is a good man, Tucker said eventually. Known him since I was a boy. He and Mary took me in for a winter after my pa died. Zadie studied Tucker's profile, illuminated by the low lamplight. You have friends scattered across the territory, it seems. Tucker's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Few and far between, but loyal. He turned to face her directly. The mare's a fair offer. She's sound, just needs regular work. Was this your doing? Zadie asked directly. Tucker didn't insult her intelligence by denying it. Mentioned you needed a mount, the rest was his idea. He shrugged. Ellis lost his daughter to diphtheria years back. She'd be about your age now. The simple explanation softened Zadie's pride. I'll thank him properly in the morning, she said. We should reach Silverton in 3 days, Tucker said, changing the subject. Weather permitting, Zadie nodded, suddenly acutely aware that their journey together was limited. Once in Silverton, Tucker would go to his ranch work, and she would. What? Try to secure the teaching position, find other employment if that failed, will you? She began, then hesitated. That is, once we reach Silverton. I'll make sure you're settled, Tucker said, seeming to understand her unasked question. Won't just leave you at the town limits. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by frustration at her own dependency. I'm not usually this helpless, she said, hearing the defensive edge in her voice. Tucker's expression softened. Never thought you were helpless, Zadie. Everyone needs a hand sometimes. He rose from his chair. Get some rest. We'll head out early tomorrow. Before she could respond, he disappeared into the second back room, leaving Zadie with her thoughts and the lingering warmth of the whiskey in her veins. Morning brought clear skies and the introduction to her new mount, a dun mare with intelligent eyes and a white blaze down her nose. Ellis had also provided basic tack, insisting it was included in the arrangement. What will you call her? Tucker asked as Zadie stroked the mare's velvety muzzle. Zadie considered for a moment. Promise, she decided, because she represents a new beginning. Tucker's approving smile sent an unexpected flutter through Zadie's chest. She busied herself with adjusting the saddle to hide her reaction. With proper supplies from Ellis's store and mounts for them both, the remaining journey to Silverton progressed more comfortably. Zadie discovered that Promise was indeed well-trained, responding easily to her commands and maintaining a steady pace alongside Silver. They fell into an easy rhythm during the day, riding side by side when the trail allowed, talking or simply enjoying the magnificent scenery of the Colorado mountains. At night, they shared camp duties, with Zadie taking on more responsibilities now that she had proper clothing and increasing strength. On their second night out from the trading post, seated beside their campfire, Tucker finally shared more of his own story. You asked why I'm going to Silverton, he began without preamble. Truth is, I'm hoping for more than just ranch work there. Zadie waited, sensing he needed space to find his words. I've been saving, he continued, poking at the fire with a stick. Nearly 8 years now. Double Creek's foreman Sam Reeves, he's looking to retire in a few years, wants someone to buy into the operation gradually. You want to be more than a hired hand, Zadie observed. Tucker nodded. Never owned anything but my horse and what I can carry. My pa was the same, always working someone else's land, following someone else's orders. His voice took on a determined edge. I want something that's mine, something permanent. Zadie understood completely. Despite growing up surrounded by wealth, none of it had truly been hers. Everything had belonged to her father, a fact made painfully clear when he cast her out with nothing but what she could carry. I think that's admirable, she said sincerely. Tucker looked up, meeting her eyes across the flames. Most women want more security than a man with just prospects can offer. The personal turn in the conversation made Zadie's heart beat faster. I think security can be an illusion, she replied carefully. My father's wealth didn't protect me when it mattered. Something shifted in Tucker's expression, a softening around his eyes, a slight parting of his lips as though he wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities that both excited and frightened Zadie. Finally, Tucker broke the connection, rising to check on the horses one last time before they settled for the night. When he returned, the conversation turned to practicalities, their expected arrival time in Silverton, where Zadie might find lodging, how to approach the town council about the teaching position. The charged moment had passed, but Zadie felt its echo in the careful way Tucker now avoided prolonged eye contact. As she settled into her bedroll that night, Zadie found herself contemplating the strange turn her life had taken. In less than a week, she had lost everything familiar and gained an unexpected ally in Tucker Xavier. Soon they would reach Silverton, and their paths would naturally diverge. The thought brought an unexpected pang of sadness. Tucker had become more than just her rescuer. He was the first person who had seen her as she truly was, without the filter of the Turner name or wealth. His steady presence had become a comfort she hadn't known she needed. Morning came too quickly, bringing them one day closer to Silverton and the end of their shared journey. Zadie found herself treasuring small moments, Tucker's soft "good morning" as he handed her coffee, the brush of his hand against hers as he helped her mount, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled at something she said. By late afternoon, they crested a rise that revealed their first view of Silverton, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley, smoke rising from chimneys against the backdrop of towering mountains. There it is, Tucker said, drawing Silver to a halt beside Promise. Your fresh start. Zadie stared at the distant town, trying to imagine her future there. Would she find acceptance, work, a place to belong? The uncertainty was both terrifying and exhilarating. Our fresh start, she corrected softly, glancing at Tucker. His answering smile held a complexity of emotions she couldn't quite decipher. Let's make camp early tonight, he suggested. We'll reach town by midday tomorrow. That evening, their last on the trail together, carried a bittersweet quality. Tucker was more talkative than usual, telling stories of his travels that made Zadie laugh despite her growing melancholy at their impending separation. Will you stay in Silverton once you've settled me? She asked eventually, voicing the question that had been nagging at her. Tucker nodded. That's the plan. Double Creek is just outside town. I'll be working there while I save enough to buy my stake. Relief washed through Zadie at the knowledge that he wouldn't simply disappear from her life. Then perhaps we'll see each other in town occasionally. I'd like that, Tucker said, his voice carrying a warmth that sent pleasant shivers down Zadie's spine. When they finally reached the outskirts of Silverton the following day, Zadie was struck by how much larger it was than she'd expected. The main street bustled with activity, wagons loaded with ore from the mines, merchants calling their wares, children darting between buildings on mysterious errands of their own. Tucker guided them toward a modest building with a sign declaring it the Silver Dollar Hotel and Dining. He dismounted and helped Zadie down, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. Hotel's reasonable, he explained. Clean too, you can stay here while you get your bearings. Inside, the proprietor, a plump woman with shrewd eyes named Mrs. Hattie Wilkins, took one look at Zadie's travel-worn appearance and Tucker's protective stance and jumped to the obvious conclusion. "We don't rent rooms by the hour," she said firmly, arms crossed over her ample bosom. Zadie flushed crimson, but Tucker merely removed his hat politely. "Miss Turner needs proper lodging while she inquires about the teaching position. She's traveled from Copper Ridge to apply." The mention of the teaching position changed Mrs. Wilkins's demeanor immediately. "Oh, the school position. Why didn't you say so?" She gave Zadie a more appraising look. "You've got education, have you?" "Yes, madam," Zadie confirmed, "and experience tutoring children of various ages." Mrs. Wilkins nodded approvingly. "Town council meets tomorrow afternoon. You should speak to Mayor Dawson before then." She pulled a key from beneath the counter. "Room 3, top of the stairs, $1 a night, includes breakfast." As Zadie reached for her meager funds, Tucker placed coins on the counter. "A week in advance," he said firmly. When Zadie began to protest, he added quietly, "You can repay me when you're settled, Mrs." Wilkins watched this exchange with interest, her initial suspicions clearly replaced by curiosity. "Dining room opens at 6, she informed them. "Best roast beef in the territory on Thursdays." After securing the horses at the livery stable, Tucker escorted Zadie to her room, a simple space with a narrow bed, washstand, and small window overlooking the main street. After days on the trail, it seemed luxuriously private. "I should go," Tucker said, lingering awkwardly in the doorway. "Need to head out to Double Creek. Let Sam know I've arrived." Zadie nodded, suddenly uncertain how to say goodbye to the man who had become so important to her in such a short time. "When will I see you again?" The question slipped out before she could consider its implications. Tucker's expression softened. "I'll be back in town Saturday for supplies. Could meet you for dinner." He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture Zadie had come to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "If you'd like, that is." "I would like that very much," Zadie replied, her heart lightening. Tucker's smile was worth her momentary boldness. "Saturday, then. Good luck with the mayor tomorrow." He hesitated, then reached for her hand, his calloused fingers wrapped gently around hers, the touch sending warmth up her arm. "You'll do fine, Zadie. This town would be lucky to have you teaching their children." Before she could respond, he released her hand and stepped back. "Until Saturday." Zadie watched from her window as Tucker collected silver from the livery and rode out of town, his straight-backed silhouette growing smaller until he disappeared around a bend in the road. Only then did she allow herself to sink onto the bed, emotions swirling through her like leaves caught in a whirlwind. In the span of a week, her entire life had been uprooted and replanted in foreign soil. Yet somehow, improbably, she felt not just hope, but something dangerously close to happiness. Tucker Xavier had found her at her lowest moment and treated her with a dignity and respect that had nothing to do with her family name. For the first time, Zadie Turner felt truly seen for herself. And the woman Tucker saw capable, strong, worthy of respect was someone she desperately wanted to become. With renewed determination, Zadie unpacked her few belongings and prepared to face her new future in Silverton, beginning with convincing Mayor Dawson that she was exactly what the town's school needed. Mayor Philip Dawson proved to be a practical man with little patience for formalities. When Zadie presented herself at his office the following morning, he wasted no time on pleasantries. "Experience?" he asked, peering at her over half-moon spectacles. "Tutored the children at my father's ranch for years," Zadie replied truthfully. "All ages, various subjects. References?" Zadie hesitated. "I left Copper Ridge. Abruptly, I have no formal references." Dawson's bushy eyebrows rose. "Abruptly, any reason Silverton should be concerned about?" "No, sir," Zadie said firmly. "Family disagreement, nothing that reflects on my character or abilities." The mayor studied her for a long moment. "Turner, you said your name was any relation to Emmett Turner of the Triple T?" Zadie's stomach tightened. "My father," she admitted. Dawson let out a low whistle. "Must have been quite the disagreement." "It was," Zadie confirmed, unwilling to elaborate. Surprisingly, the mayor nodded as if her reticence satisfied him. Town needs a teacher. Children are falling behind. Last 3 candidates were too refined for frontier life. He gave her an assessing look. You seem made of sterner stuff. I am, Zadie affirmed. Council meets at 2, be there. We'll decide after hearing you speak. He returned to his paperwork, effectively dismissing her. Zadie spent the intervening hours exploring Silverton. Despite its rough edges, the town showed signs of permanence and prosperity: a proper church with a bell tower, several substantial businesses, and a newly constructed schoolhouse at the edge of town. The schoolhouse was a simple clapboard building with large windows and a small bell mounted above the door. Peering through the windows, Zadie could see rows of benches, a teacher's desk, and a blackboard. Shelves held a modest collection of books, far fewer than she was accustomed to, but a start. A voice behind her made her jump. Looking to steal the silverware, Zadie whirled to find a woman perhaps 5 years her senior, arms crossed and expression suspicious. I beg your pardon, nobody but trouble comes snooping around empty buildings, the woman stated flatly. I'm not snooping, Zadie replied, drawing herself up. I'm applying for the teaching position. Mayor Dawson suggested I familiarize myself with the school. The woman's demeanor changed instantly. The teaching position? Oh, thank heavens, I'm Alina Reed, my husband's on the town council. She extended a hand which Zadie shook. I've been trying to keep lessons going for the younger children since Miss Abernathy left, but with the store to run and my own 3 to mind. Zadie Turner, Zadie introduced herself. I understand the council meets this afternoon. Alina nodded eagerly. Yes, and I'll make sure Walter knows how desperately we need you. 26 school-age children in Silverton now, and more coming as the mines expand. She unlocked the schoolhouse door. Let me show you around. The interior was dusty but well organized. Alina explained the current arrangement: younger children in the mornings, older ones in the afternoons, with the most advanced students receiving additional instruction on Saturdays. Previous teacher lived in the back room, Alina explained, showing Zadie a small chamber behind the classroom with a bed, stove, and washstand. It's not much, but it's private and saves on rent. Zadie examined the space, already envisioning how she might make it her own. It's perfect, she declared, meaning it. After days on the trail, even this modest accommodation seemed luxurious. By the time the council meeting convened, Zadie felt considerably more confident. Alina had introduced her to several mothers, all of whom expressed relief at the prospect of regular schooling resuming. The council consisted of 6 men, including Mayor Dawson and Alina's husband Walter. They asked practical questions about her educational philosophy, how she would handle children of different ages and abilities, and whether she could manage the occasional difficult child. Zadie answered honestly, drawing on her experiences with the ranch children and her own education. When asked about salary requirements, she named a modest figure that caused several council members to exchange relieved glances. After a brief private discussion, Mayor Dawson announced their decision. Miss Turner, the position is yours, commencing Monday next. Salary as discussed, plus lodging at the schoolhouse and a monthly allotment for supplies. Just like that, Zadie had secured her independence. As she walked back to the hotel, her steps felt lighter than they had in years. She had a purpose, a place to live, and the means to support herself, all without relying on the Turner name or fortune. Her only regret was that Tucker wasn't there to share her success. The thought surprised her with its intensity. In just a week, he had become the person whose opinion mattered most to her. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. The intervening days passed in a flurry of activity. Zadie moved from the hotel to the schoolhouse, using her small savings to purchase necessities: bedding, basic kitchenware, and a few personal items. Alina introduced her around town, helping establish her as Silverton's new teacher rather than a mysterious newcomer. Few people asked about her past, for which Zadie was grateful. Those who recognized the Turner name seemed content with her vague explanation of seeking independence, a common enough reason for people to head west. By Saturday, the schoolhouse back room had been transformed into a cozy living space. and Zadie had reviewed the previous teacher's notes and prepared lesson plans for the coming week. Her anticipation of Tucker's visit grew with each passing hour until she found herself changing her dress 3 times before settling on the blue-sprigged cotton from Ellis's wife, the most becoming of her limited wardrobe. When a knock finally came at the schoolhouse door late that afternoon, Zadie's heart leapt. She smoothed her skirts unnecessarily and took a steadying breath before opening the door. Tucker stood on the threshold, hat in hand. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance. His hair was neatly trimmed, his shirt freshly laundered, and his boots polished. The sight of him made Zadie's breath catch. "Miss Turner," he greeted her formally, though his eyes held a warmth that belied the formality. "I hear congratulations are in order. News travels fast," Zadie observed, stepping aside to invite him in. "Small town," Tucker replied with a smile. "Heard it at the mercantile, the livery, and the barber shop." He glanced around the schoolroom. "So this is where you'll be shaping young minds." "It is," Zadie confirmed, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "Would you like to see what I've done with the living quarters?" Tucker hesitated. Wouldn't want to cause talk, a man visiting a single lady's rooms. Zadie hadn't considered how their meeting might appear to others. In Copper Ridge, her family's position had insulated her from such concerns. Now, as the town's teacher, her reputation mattered in new ways. "You're right, of course," she acknowledged. "Perhaps dinner at the hotel instead," Tucker nodded, looking relieved. "I took the liberty of making arrangements with Mrs. Wilkins. She's expecting us at 6. As they walked together toward the hotel, Zadie was acutely aware of the glances they received from townspeople. Tucker must have noticed too, for he maintained a respectful distance between them, though his occasional sideways glances carried a warmth that made propriety feel like an unnecessary burden. Dinner was a revelation. Seated across from Tucker at a corner table in the hotel dining room, Zadie discovered new dimensions to the man who had rescued her. Away from the trail and its demands, he spoke more freely about his hopes for the future, his plans to learn the business side of ranching from Sam Reeves, his dream of eventually building his own house on Double Creek land. "Sam has no children," Tucker explained. "Says he'd rather see the ranch go to someone who loves it than have it sold off when he's gone." "He must think highly of you," Zadie observed. Tucker shrugged, though she could see he was pleased by the assessment. "Known me since I was a boy." "My pa worked for him briefly before the wanderlust took hold again." "And do you have the same wanderlust?" Zadie asked, trying to sound casual despite the importance of his answer. Tucker's eyes met hers directly. "Not anymore. Found what I've been looking for." Something in his gaze suggested he meant more than just the ranch opportunity, but Zadie didn't dare interpret it further. As they finished their meal, Tucker cleared his throat nervously. "There's a social gathering after church tomorrow, dance at the town hall." He twisted his napkin slightly. "Thought you might like to attend, good way to meet more folks." Zadie hesitated. A dance meant being seen publicly in Tucker's company, a statement neither of them might be ready to make, yet the prospect of spending more time with him was too tempting to refuse. "I'd like that," she said finally. "Though I should warn you, I haven't danced in some time." Tucker's smile was immediate and warming. "Neither have I. We can be rusty together." When he escorted her back to the schoolhouse, Zadie found herself wishing their evening didn't have to end. At her door, Tucker removed his hat and held it against his chest. "Thank you for dinner," Zadie said, suddenly shy. "It was lovely." Tucker nodded, looking as though he wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Finally, he settled on, "Until tomorrow, then." "Tomorrow," Zadie agreed. She watched him walk away, his tall figure outlined against the setting sun, and felt a curious mixture of contentment and longing. Tucker Xavier had become more than her rescuer or her guide. He had become the person she most wanted to share her thoughts with, her triumphs and her fears. The realization should have frightened her, but somehow it didn't. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Sunday morning found Zadie attending Silverton's small church, where she was introduced as the new teacher to those who hadn't yet heard the news. She was welcomed warmly, particularly by families with school-age children. When Tucker arrived, taking a seat near the back, several knowing glances were exchanged among the congregation. After the service, Alina Reed approached Zadie with a concerned expression. "I feel I should mention, as a friend," she said quietly, "that there's talk about you and Mr. Xavier." Zadie's stomach tightened. "What kind of talk?" "Nothing scandalous yet," Alina assured her. "Just curiosity about how you arrived in town together." "Teachers are held to high standards of behavior, you understand," Zadie nodded, remembering similar strictures in Copper Ridge. "Mr. Xavier assisted me when I was in difficulty on the trail. He's been a perfect gentleman." Alina patted her arm. "I believed as much." "Just be careful at the dance tonight. Eyes will be watching." The warning cast a slight shadow over Zadie's anticipation, but couldn't dim it entirely. She spent the afternoon preparing washing her hair, pressing her dress, and even fashioning a simple hair ornament from a scrap of ribbon Alina had given her. Tucker arrived precisely at 7, dressed in his best, a dark wool jacket over a clean white shirt, hair neatly combed. The appreciation in his eyes when he saw her maid Zadie's careful preparations worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said simply. The town hall was decorated with paper lanterns and wildflowers for the occasion. A small band played lively tunes, and couples of all ages filled the dance floor. Zadie recognized many faces from church that morning, including Mayor Dawson and his wife, who nodded approvingly in her direction. True to his word, Tucker was an enthusiastic, if somewhat unpracticed dancer. After a few awkward starts, they found their rhythm together, laughing at their missteps rather than being embarrassed by them. By their third dance, they moved with surprising harmony. During a break, while Tucker fetched them punch, Alina's husband Walter approached Zadie. "Miss Turner," he greeted her, "settling in well, I see." "Yes, thank you," Zadie replied. "Everyone has been very welcoming." Walter nodded, his expression turning more serious. "Known Tucker Xavier a long time, good man, works harder than most." He glanced toward where Tucker stood at the punch table. "But you should know his reputation with ladies hasn't always been." "Steady," Zadie stiffened. "Mr. Reed, I'm not sure what you're implying." "No implication," Walter interrupted gently. "Just concerned. Town's investment in a teacher is significant. Would hate to see you distracted or, worse, leaving prematurely due to entanglements." Before Zadie could form a suitably indignant response, Tucker returned with their drinks. Walter excused himself with a meaningful look that Tucker couldn't miss. "What was that about?" Tucker asked, handing Zadie a cup. "Apparently the town is concerned about our friendship," Zadie replied, trying to keep her tone light despite her inner turmoil. Tucker's expression darkened. "Let me guess. Walter mentioned my reputation." Zadie nodded, studying Tucker's face carefully. "Is there truth to it?" Tucker sighed, leading her to a quieter corner of the room. "When I first came through Silverton years back, I was younger, foolish. There was a girl, Clara Davis. Her father owned the mercantile then." He paused, clearly uncomfortable with the memory. "We courted briefly. I moved on when work took me elsewhere. Should have ended things properly before leaving. And now they think you'll do the same with me," Zadie concluded. Tucker's eyes met hers directly. "I'm not that young man anymore." Something in his gaze, earnest, almost pleading for understanding, touched Zadie deeply. "I believe you," she said simply. Relief washed over Tucker's features. "Still want to dance with a man with a questionable past?" In answer, Zadie set down her punch and extended her hand. "Very much so." As they rejoined the dancers, Zadie was acutely aware of the attention they attracted. Yet somehow, with Tucker's hand warm against her waist and his eyes smiling down at her, the opinions of Silverton's residents seemed far less important than they had earlier. The evening passed too quickly. When Tucker escorted her home, the moonlight silvered the path to the schoolhouse and cast long shadows behind them. At her door, he seemed reluctant to leave. "I start work in earnest tomorrow," he said, breaking their companionable silence. "Might not make it to town for a few days." Disappointment settled in Zadie's chest, though she tried not to show it. "Of course, you have responsibilities." "But I'd like to see you again," Tucker continued, his voice lower. "Saturday, I could take you to see Double Creek if you'd like." The invitation carried weight beyond a simple outing, and they both knew it. Accepting meant acknowledging that whatever was growing between them deserved nurturing, despite the town's watchful eyes. "I'd like that very much," Zadie replied, her decision made without hesitation. Tucker's smile in response was worth any potential gossip. He took her hand, his thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles. "Good night, Zadie Turner." "Good night, Tucker Xavier," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Long after he disappeared down the moonlit road, Zadie stood at her door, her hand still tingling from his touch. For the first time since leaving Copper Ridge, she felt not just hope but genuine happiness. Monday brought the first day of school, and with it, a welcome distraction from thoughts of Tucker. 23 students arrived, ranging from 5-year-old Emmy Collins, who could barely write her name, to 17-year-old Joseph Miller, who worked the mines part-time but wanted to improve his mathematics. Zadie found herself thoroughly enjoying the challenge. The children were eager to learn, if somewhat behind in their studies due to the interruption in their education. By week's end, she had established a routine and begun to know each student's strengths and weaknesses. The work was exhausting but deeply satisfying. Each evening, Zadie fell into bed pleasantly tired, her mind already planning the next day's lessons. Yet beneath her focus on her new responsibilities ran a constant undercurrent of anticipation for Saturday. When Saturday finally arrived, Zadie was up with the dawn, too excited to sleep late despite it being her only day without formal teaching duties. She chose her clothing carefully, a practical riding skirt Alina had helped her alter, and a simple blouse that flattered her coloring. Tucker arrived mid-morning, riding silver and leading a gentle bay gelding for Zadie. "Thought Promise might need a rest," he explained. "This is Copper. Sam loaned him for the day." The ride to Double Creek took nearly an hour, but Zadie scarcely noticed the time passing. Tucker pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area, his pride in the ranch evident in every word. When they crested a hill that revealed their destination, Zadie understood why. Double Creek Ranch spread across a verdant valley, bisected by twin streams that gave the property its name. The main house was substantial but not ostentatious, with several outbuildings arranged nearby. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully on lush grass, while closer to the house, several horses occupied a fenced corral. "It's beautiful," Zadie said sincerely. Tucker's expression was one of simple contentment. Never gets old seeing it like this. At the main house, they were greeted by Sam Reeves, a weathered man in his 60s with shrewd eyes and a firm handshake. He welcomed Zadie warmly, making no comment about her arrival with Tucker beyond a knowing glance between them. Over a simple lunch prepared by the ranch cook, Sam regaled Zadie with stories of the ranch's early days and his plans for its future. It became increasingly clear that those plans included Tucker in a significant role. "Boy's got a head for business he doesn't even know about yet," Sam declared, ignoring Tucker's embarrassed protest. "Seize opportunities others miss." After lunch, Tucker showed Zadie around the property, the stables where prized breeding stock was kept, the bunkhouse where the hands lived, and finally, a rise overlooking the valley where a foundation had been laid. "What's this going to be?" Zadie asked, noting the fresh-cut lumber stacked nearby. Tucker rubbed the back of his neck in that now familiar gesture of slight nervousness. "My house. Eventually. Sam's letting me build on a corner of the property, part of our arrangement." Zadie studied the site, its commanding view of the valley, the nearby creek, the shelter of tall pines. "It's a perfect spot." "That's what I thought," Tucker agreed, watching her closely. "Want to see the plans?" From his saddlebag, he produced a carefully folded paper with rough sketches of a modest but thoughtfully designed home. "Nothing fancy," he said almost apologetically, "but solid, built to last." As Zadie examined the drawings, she couldn't help imagining what it would be like to live in such a home, the morning light through the east-facing kitchen window, evenings spent on the broad front porch Tucker had included in his design. The vision was so vivid, it startled her with its intensity. "It's lovely," she said finally, returning the plans. "You've thought of everything?" Not everything, Tucker replied, his voice carrying a weight that drew Zadie's gaze to his face. What she saw there, longing, hope, uncertainty, mirrored her own tangled emotions. They stood in silence for a moment, the unspoken possibility hanging between them. Zadie, Tucker began finally, her name sounding like a question and an answer all at once. I know we haven't known each other long, might seem foolish to some. He took a deep breath. But I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Zadie's heart thundered in her chest. How do you feel? She asked, needing to hear the words. Tucker stepped closer, close enough that she could see the varying shades of blue in his eyes. Like I found something I didn't even know I was missing. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. When I saw you at that creek, something told me my life was about to change. Zadie's throat tightened with emotion. Mine too, she whispered. I know you're just getting settled in Silverton, Tucker continued. Building your own life, I respect that. His thumb traced patterns on her palm. But I wanted you to know where I stand, how I feel. Zadie searched his face, finding nothing but sincerity in his expression. Tucker Xavier, she said softly, I think I started falling in love with you the moment you said they may not want you, but I do. The words had tumbled out before she could consider their boldness, but seeing Tucker's expression transform surprise giving way to joy banished any regret. You remember that? He asked, wonder in his voice. I remember everything about those first moments, Zadie confessed. I was so lost, so alone, and then there you were, offering help with no expectations. Tucker's free hand rose to cup her cheek, his touch reverent. May I kiss you, Zadie Turner? In answer, Zadie lifted her face to his. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and a promise combined. When they parted, Tucker's smile was brighter than Zadie had ever seen it. I love you, he said simply. Probably have since that first night by the fire when you insisted on taking watch. Zadie laughed, joy bubbling up from deep within her. I never did take that watch, did I? No, Tucker agreed, his eyes twinkling, but you were willing and that mattered. As the afternoon light began to fade, they reluctantly mounted their horses for the ride back to town. Something fundamental had shifted between them, a boundary crossed, a future begun. Will you come to dinner tomorrow? Zadie asked as they approached the schoolhouse. After church. I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage a decent meal. Tucker nodded, happiness evident in every line of his face. I'd be honored. Their goodbye at her door was longer this time, sealed with another kiss that held more confidence than the first. When Tucker finally rode away, Zadie watched until he disappeared from view, her heart fuller than she'd ever known it could be. Inside, she moved about her small quarters, seeing them with new eyes not as a temporary shelter, but as the beginning of something permanent. For the first time since leaving her father's house, Zadie felt truly at home. The following weeks established a pattern that quickly became the framework of Zadie's new life. Weekdays were devoted to her students, whose progress gave her immense satisfaction. Evenings were spent preparing lessons, grading papers, and occasionally socializing with townspeople who had come to accept her as their teacher. Sundays began with church, followed by dinner with Tucker, either at her quarters or at the hotel when propriety demanded a more public setting. Tucker rode into town at least once midweek as well, often bringing small gifts, wildflowers gathered along the trail, a book he'd found in Silver City, once even a kitten from a litter born in the Double Creek barn. The kitten, a tortoiseshell female Zadie named Minerva, quickly established herself as the unofficial school mascot, delighting the students and providing Zadie with company during the nights Tucker couldn't be in town. As summer progressed, their relationship deepened. Tucker's visits became a fixture in Silverton life, and gradually, the initial gossip faded into acceptance. Even Walter Reed eventually conceded that Tucker's intentions appeared honorable, especially when it became known that he was working additional hours to expedite construction of his house at Double Creek. In late July, Tucker invited Zadie to accompany him to the site where significant progress had been made. The foundation was complete, the frame erected, and the roof nearly finished. Workers moved about the structure, but Tucker led Zadie to a quiet spot beneath a pine tree. It's coming along faster than I expected, he said, his voice carrying an undercurrent of nervous energy Zadie couldn't quite interpret. It's wonderful, she replied honestly. You must be eager to move in before winter. Tucker nodded, his eyes on the house rather than on her. That's the plan. But, he hesitated, then turned to face her directly. I've been thinking about what it would be like living here alone. Zadie's heart skipped a beat. And I can't see it, Tucker admitted. Every time I imagine this house, you're in it, making coffee in the morning. Reading by the fire at night, he took her hands in his. I know it's fast. We've known each other barely 3 months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. From his pocket, he withdrew a small leather pouch. This was my mother's, he explained, opening it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small pearl. Only thing of hers I have left. Zadie's breath caught as Tucker knelt before her, the ring held between his fingers. Zadie Turner, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. I love you more than I thought possible. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears blurred Zadie's vision as joy swept through her. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, Tucker Xavier, I will marry you. The ring slid onto her finger slightly loose but easily adjusted. Tucker rose to his feet and gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the emotion words couldn't express. When they finally parted, both breathless and smiling, Tucker rested his forehead against hers. When? He asked simply. As soon as the house is ready, Zadie replied without hesitation. I don't want to wait longer than necessary. Tucker's smile widened. I'll have the men working day and night. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Silverton. Most reactions were positive congratulations from her students and their parents, a tearfully happy embrace from Alina Reed, and a gruffly approving nod from Mayor Dawson, who assured Zadie her teaching position remained secure for as long as you want it, married or not. Sam Reeves was especially pleased, hosting a small celebration at the ranch and presenting them with a matched pair of quality saddle horses as an engagement gift. Can't have the future co-owner of Double Creek riding anything but the best, he declared, winking at Zadie. Not everyone was enthusiastic, however. Several mothers of Zadie's older students expressed concern about a married woman continuing to teach. The town council debated the matter at their August meeting, ultimately deciding that given the difficulty of finding qualified teachers, they would allow Zadie to fulfill her contract through the end of the school year, after which the situation would be reassessed. Tucker was outraged at the conditional approval. It's not right, he fumed during a Sunday walk by the creek. You're twice the teacher they've ever had. It's how things are, Zadie replied pragmatically. Besides, we have months before it becomes an issue. She squeezed his hand. Let's focus on happier matters, like our wedding. They decided on an October ceremony when the aspen trees would be at their golden peak and the house would be complete. The school term would be well established by then, allowing Zadie to take a short break for a wedding trip to Denver. As their wedding day approached, one shadow remained over Zadie's happiness: her estrangement from her family. Though she had built a new life in Silverton, the pain of her father's rejection lingered. In quiet moments, she found herself wondering if her mother would have approved of Tucker if her older brothers, long moved away to pursue their own fortunes, knew of her banishment, if her father ever regretted his harsh judgment. Tucker noticed her melancholy one evening as they sat on the nearly completed porch of their future home. What's troubling you? He asked gently. Zadie sighed, leaning against his shoulder. Just thinking of my family, wishing things had been different. Tucker was silent for a moment, his arm tightening around her. Would you want them to know about the wedding? The question caught Zadie off guard. I don't know, my father made his position clear. What about your brothers? You've spoken fondly of them. Zadie considered this. Her eldest brother, James, had always been protective of her, even from a distance. He maintained a successful law practice in Denver, far from their father's influence. James might want to know, she admitted. Then write to him, Tucker encouraged. Worst he can do is not respond. After careful consideration, Zadie composed a letter to James, explaining her situation in the most factual terms possible and extending an invitation to her wedding. She didn't truly expect a response, which made the letter that arrived at the Silverton post office 2 weeks later all the more surprising. James's response was immediate and unequivocal. Not only would he attend her wedding, but he had already confronted their father about the circumstances of her departure. "Father's new wife has shown her true colors in other ways since you're leaving," he wrote. "Many in town now question his judgment where she is concerned. Your oldest students have spoken highly of your teaching to anyone who would listen." Most surprisingly, James reported that their middle brother, William, had recently returned to Copper Ridge and was equally distressed by Zadie's banishment. "He asks that you consider allowing him to attend as well," James wrote. "He feels he failed you by not being present when you needed an advocate." Tears blurred Zadie's vision as she shared the letter with Tucker. "My brothers," she whispered. "They believe me." Tucker's expression was one of quiet satisfaction. "Family that matters finds its way back to you," he observed, kissing her forehead. With renewed joy, Zadie threw herself into the final preparations for their wedding. The house was completed ahead of schedule, thanks to Tucker's determination and additional workers hired from town. Simple but well-crafted furniture filled the rooms, some purchased in Silverton, some made by Sam's ranch carpenter, and a few special pieces ordered from Denver as wedding gifts from Zadie's brothers. The day before the ceremony, James and William arrived in Silverton, their presence causing quite a stir. The Turner name carried weight even here, and the arrival of two well-dressed gentlemen in a fine carriage drew considerable attention. Their reunion with Zadie was emotional tears and embraces and apologies that she insisted were unnecessary. When she introduced them to Tucker, both brothers scrutinized him with the protective intensity of men determined not to see their sister hurt again. "You're the man who found our sister when she needed help most," James said finally, extending his hand. "I'm the man who recognized her worth when others didn't," Tucker replied steadily, meeting James's gaze without flinching. William's assessment was equally direct. "You're building a good life here, the best I know how," Tucker answered honestly. Whatever they saw in Tucker's face must have satisfied them, for the tension eased, and by dinner that evening, the conversation had turned comfortable, even jovial at times. "Father doesn't know we're here," William confided quietly when he and Zadie had a moment alone, "but he asks about you when he thinks his wife won't hear." Zadie absorbed this information with complicated emotions. "Is he well?" William nodded. "In body, yes. In spirit," he shrugged. "He made his choice, Zadie, as did you. I think in time he may recognize his error." "And if he doesn't?" Zadie asked. William squeezed her hand. "Then he'll have missed knowing the remarkable woman his daughter has become. That would be his loss, not yours." The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, with aspen trees glowing like gold coins against the blue Colorado sky. The ceremony took place at the church, with Reverend Gardner officiating. Sam Reeves stood as Tucker's best man, while Alina Reed helped Zadie prepare and James walked her down the aisle. Zadie wore a gown of ivory silk, a gift from her brothers that had arrived by special courier from Denver just days before. Tucker waited at the altar in a new black suit, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to awestruck joy as Zadie appeared. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, their voices steady as they promised to love, honor, and cherish one another through whatever life might bring. When Tucker placed his mother's ring on Zadie's finger, now properly sized, and the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was both tender and certain, sealing a journey that had begun with a chance encounter by a creek. The celebration afterward at Double Creek Ranch brought together the entire community, ranch hands and townspeople, students and their families, all gathered to wish the new couple well. As twilight fell, lanterns illuminated the yard, and music from Sam's prized phonograph inspired dancing that continued well into the evening. When the last guests had departed, Tucker led Zadie to their waiting carriage for the short journey to their new home. Flowers and ribbons decorated the doorway, and inside lamps had been lit, creating a warm, welcoming glow. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," Tucker said softly as he carried her across the threshold. Zadie's heart swelled with emotion as she took in their home the comfortable parlor with its river stone fireplace, the kitchen with its east-facing window just as Tucker had planned, the bedroom with the handcrafted bed that had been Sam's wedding gift. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning in Tucker's arms to face him. "Everything I could have wished for." Tucker's smile held all the love and promise she could ever want. "Just the beginning," he assured her, lowering his lips to hers. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Zadie reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as the most devastating day of her life cast out by her family, alone and uncertain, had led her to a man whose love was more genuine than anything she'd known before, and a life richer in meaning than she could have imagined. "What are you thinking?" Tucker asked, his voice drowsy as he traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "That sometimes losing what you thought you needed leads you to what you truly wanted all along," Zadie replied, nestling closer to him. Tucker's arms tightened around her. "From the moment I found you, I knew you were meant to be found by me." Zadie smiled in the darkness, remembering his words that had given her hope when she needed it most. "They may not want you, but I do," simple words that had changed everything. "I love you, Tucker Xavier," she whispered. "And I love you, Zadie Xavier," he replied, the new name settling around her like a cherished embrace. Now and always. As Zadie drifted toward sleep in her husband's arms, she felt a sense of rightness and belonging that transcended all her previous conceptions of home. Her journey had been unexpected, often difficult, but had led her precisely where she was meant to be, beside a man who had seen her value when she was at her lowest, and who would stand beside her through whatever life might bring. Their story, she knew, was just beginning. But its foundation, built on kindness, respect, and love discovered in the most unlikely circumstances, would withstand whatever storms might come. Together, they would build a life as solid and enduring as the mountains that surrounded their home. And that was all either of them had ever truly wanted.